I was walking at Al Chowk with 4 or 5 of my colleagues, and somebody just ran from behind. And in my ears, he said in Kashmiri, "Sachi marun, sachi ki or amat." Was Marots. And I got a lot of threats after that from Kashmiri terror groups, from separatists. What was the need to take the Kashmir issue to the United Nations? I personally feel that the Kashmir files is just 5% or 10% of the reality. Reality is that Kashmiri Hindus were ethnically cleansed. We Kashmiri Hindus suffered immensely. We lost our people, we lost our homes, we lost our temples, we lost our history, we lost everything. All these separatists, at least most of them, including Yasin Malik, used to get money from the Indian intelligence agencies. Prime Minister Modi requested Putin and Zelensky that, we want our people out. I don't know how you do it. Look at the leaders of the Hamas who are staying in Qatar in luxurious life. They have a pool, they have a villa, they have private jets.
Pakistan official gave them a statement that Indian RAW is training their own agents in UAE, and then they are also training some local agents there in Pakistan. They are paying them, and then they are telling them to kill these terrorists.
Perhaps Pakistan needs to contemplate and think and introspect who these unidentified gunmen are. Taliban is much more close to India than Pakistan. China wants to be the only elephant in the room. China wants to be the only power.
I think dragon in the room would be
Dragon in the room, yeah, of course.
Hello guys, and welcome back to AP Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for giving in so much of love and support. It really means a lot to us. And speaking about today's episode, guys, today's episode is one of those episodes for which I can only feel one emotion, that is just shock. Shock is a very negative word to use for this, but this conversation, every minute, every second of this conversation was something which was an eye-opener for me. Even though I personally really love to touch the geopolitics, the politics happening in the country, the history of our Indian politics, but still, even after reading about so many things, this podcast was a very surprising thing for me. Today with us, we are having Aditya Raj Kaul sir, who is currently the executive editor at TV9 Network. In this conversation that I had with Aditya sir, we not only discussed the problems that happened in Kashmir and the various issues revolving around the socio-economic politics and the international politics involved there, but we rather talked about some really important issues that were never noticed by the mainstream media. And not only that, we also talked about multiple foreign policies related issues, whether it's China, whether it's tackling Pakistan, whether it's tackling the West. So I really hope that this conversation can be a really powerhouse thing for you. If you're someone who is really interested in geopolitics and media and Kashmir, this is the conversation for you. So with that, AP Podcast rolling in 3, 2, 1. First of all, Aditya sir, thank you so much for being here. It's really a pleasure to host you here, and let me tell you this, that I have been planning to get you. Somehow TEDx Hindu became that part that I could meet you in person, and that's how we got you here. But I was really looking forward to meeting you. So thank you so much for being here, sir.
Well, it's a great privilege to be here with you.
Okay, privilege.
I'm very happy that I reconnect with Delhi University because of these events that actually made me meet you. You invited me to Hindu College. And usually I don't get time, बिल्कुल टाइम ही नहीं मिलता कॉलेज आने का. मेरे को याद है कुछ साल पहले मैं सर्टिफिकेट लेने आया था, वो भी करीबन 10-15 साल बाद कॉलेज के. And that was the only time that I got back to college. So great, looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much. You were from Ramjas, right?
I was in Ramjas College back in 2006, 2007. And I did my political science honors from Ramjas College. Yeah.
Okay. So starting this conversation, I would really first like to go into the depths of it, as in depths of journalism first.
Sure.
Before we comprehend different topics कि क्या चल रहा है आपके around society में. You are coming from a community which I also belong to, which has faced so much. And now, in recent past, people are talking about it. There are things being made on it, whether it's movies, whether it's news articles or anything. So when we talk about this particular community, that is the Kashmiri Hindu community, so I still feel seeing my own grandparents or all the people who belong to this phase who were actually there in Kashmir, that they still have this part of trauma in them. They're afraid. They're still comprehending that now they are living a normal life. So when you as a person are now into journalism, which is a very explicit field, you have to be in front of camera, you are someone whose opinions matters. How does that connect with the thing that you face personally in your own community, and you also saw that within your own people? How does it connect with journalism?
Well, I think there are multiple questions in your single question. There are multiple layers. So it will certainly be a very long answer.
Sure.
I actually was born on 13th April 1989. And this is in the midst of terrorism, in the midst of...
In Kashmir?
In Kashmir. And my father and my parents tell me that when the first bomb blast took place in the Kashmir University, that's when I was born. I was born and the first bomb blast actually took place. Of course, there were certain incidents like the killing of a prominent lawyer, Tikilal Taplu, that happened, I think, on around 13th September, around 89. And numerous such incidents took place. And of course, I will not dwell into history now. We know what happened and led to Exodus. But this kind of a trauma has been there in our elders, especially our parents and grandparents. But I would say that I also faced this trauma. I haven't stayed in Kashmir much, just about 9 months. And then we moved to a camp in Jammu. We stayed in a kind of a garage or a cowshed, should I say, where at least 12 to 16 members of my family stayed for a few months.
And you were just an year old here?
I was hardly a year old. I actually celebrated my first birthday in that kind of a camp setup where you can see trunks behind and there's a cloth or bed sheet that covers all the trunks, and I'm actually cutting a small cake. That historical photograph is still there. So my first birthday was in exile, was unfortunately in a camp-like setup, a refugee in my own country. And, I say that I have this trauma because my parents, I've seen them suffer. I might have been really young, but I've seen them that how they migrated from Jammu to Delhi. Even though I consider myself lucky that my parents decided to come to Delhi, I got more opportunities as compared to those who stayed back in Jammu, or perhaps a few others who stayed in Kashmir. Parents suffered a lot. I mean, my father was a publisher in Kashmir. He had his own publication house in front of the Vishwabharati College in Rainawari. And my mother was doing a PhD, etc. at the Kashmir University. Thereafter, she got a government job in Delhi. But in Delhi, it was tough. I mean, the life was so fast as compared to Jammu and Kashmir.
The cultural change was very quick.
The cultural change was quick. And there was no money. There was no backing. There were no relatives to support us. All our goods, all our luggage, all our certificates, everything was lost in Kashmir. It was in that house that we left behind. And we stayed in the first glimpse of Delhi. Of course, I was just about a year old or so. My parents rented an accommodation in Shakarpur of East Delhi, which was a house without a single window. It was a small room and it had no windows. And mind you, in peak summers, in peak sweltering heat, we used to stay there, and I was just so young. And thereafter, they had to start from scratch. My mother, thankfully, by 1993-94, got a government job in Delhi at the Indira Gandhi National Centre for Arts, which comes under the Ministry of Culture. But my father had to re-establish the publication house. So I've seen my parents carry sacks of books on their shoulders and then go from one publication house to another, from one seller to another, from one library to another, to actually re-establish their publication house in Delhi. And that's how our life really began. So I've seen this kind of a trauma where my parents have suffered immensely, but they never let my grandparents or me suffer or let us know that what is actually going through their mind all these years. And today when I'm sitting at home and we have a drawing room conversation about Kashmir, or perhaps we are just having a normal dinner or watching TV, every single day my father talks about Kashmir. Every single day, he reminisces his past, his childhood, what he used to do with his friends, or travel to perhaps Shankaracharya or Hari Parbat or Kheer Bhavani in Kashmir, are prominent temples. He talks about the theatre and plays that he used to do early in childhood, and a lot of other memories. So I think this trauma, this kind of a longing to return to Kashmir will always remain so. And for me personally, I think my career in journalism really began because of this trauma. Because I had this within me that our community continued to suffer, but nobody raised our voice. Nobody actually wrote about us. Nobody actually on television studios debated on our plight or the justice that we actually were demanding. So somebody had to raise that voice. So in college itself, when I was in Delhi University in 2006, I formed a group called United Students, which was an apolitical group, and actually campaigned in Delhi University. But thereafter, by the end of my first year, I formed a group called Roots in Kashmir, which was an advocacy group for Kashmiri Pandit youth worldwide. And within a span of few weeks and months, we had more than 500 members all across the globe, and we were campaigning. And perhaps the base that we set in 2006, because every time terrorist Yasin Malik was in Delhi, or Gilani, Syed Ali Shah Gilani was in Delhi, we used to protest. And peacefully, we didn't pick up stones or beat up someone. We used to protest and intellectually debate with them. And mind you, the kind of debate we did, the kind of protests we did, we raised our voice, is perhaps the only reason that Article 370 was abrogated. Because we forced the government that this has to be the narrative, not just Kashmiri Pandits, but the narrative of equality, the narrative of Jammu and Kashmir being an equal part of any other state in India.
This was not backed by any political party.
No political
like
party
ABVP,
whatsoever.
NSUI, nothing.
In fact, I remember having massive debates even with the BJP, because BJP for decades together had Article 370 abrogation on their manifesto, but they didn't act about it. There was no political will. I mean, we had a great Prime Minister like Atal Bihari Vajpayee, but even he spoke about Jamhuriyat, Kashmiriyat and Insaniyat, which is, good for your propaganda and narrative, but on ground it doesn't do much. So somebody needed to have that political will to bring in a drastic transformation. But in those, we've lived those decades wherein the mainstream media, there was no question of Kashmiri Pandits. I mean, forget Kashmiri Pandits. We couldn't even oppose Article 370. I remember I was in, NDTV in 2008. I was a participant, I was a panelist on The Big Fight. And we had prominent members from the National Conference, PDP, BJP, Congress and other political parties. And when I said that Article 370 will have to go, this kind of a solution of autonomy or self-rule will have to go, we had, participants from the National Conference laughing at me, mocking me, that what is this person even talking? Does he know what he's talking? And 10 years, 15 years down the line, we know what has happened in Kashmir now, and these same people are completely lost at words. They're perhaps hiding in their dens in Kashmir, and they do not know how to react. So that's the reality.
And also, I really want to bring this one moment when I was researching about you. It was during the time of India Today conclave, almost 12 years back.
Yeah.
Where there was this conclave and it was your turn to ask question and Mr. Gilani was sitting there. I am still having goosebumps remembering that moment because it was the very first time I saw someone so explicitly spitting out facts about a community that has faced so much of trauma. So personally, I would just like to know your experience during that time when you asked that question.
Well, yes, it was 12 to 13 years back.
Yeah.
And I think Arun Puri, who is the promoter and owner of India Today, had invited me to that campaign, to that conclave. And I was sitting there. I was just normally sitting there. And there was this debate on Kashmir that was going on. And there were three panelists. One was Farooq Abdullah, the former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. Second was Arif Mohammad Khan, the former Aviation Minister and presently the Governor of Kerala. And third was Syed Ali Shah Gilani, the separatist radical hawk of Hurriyat, who is no more now. So I was sitting in the audience, and outside, and this was at the Taj Palace in New Delhi, outside there was a massive protest on. There were Kashmiri Pandits and activists who were protesting that why Gilani has been called, but there's no representative from Kashmiri Pandits who actually believes in the Indian Constitution, who believes inequality and wants justice to be done and end of terrorism. So by the end of the discussion, it was perhaps an hour or an hour long or a 90-minute conversation. Suddenly, Manoj Joshi, who was the moderator of this particular Kashmir debate, stood up because perhaps Arun Puri had told him that I am also sitting in the audience, and he invited me to speak. He invited me to, in fact, ask a question. But I told them that, I don't have a question because I know
his ideology.
I know Gilani, I know his ideology, I know what he stands for. And within minutes, because I had not prepared, suddenly out of the blue, somebody asked me to speak. And emotions came out raw. These emotions of kind of, anger, a lot of things fuming inside me. So I said that, आप किस आज़ादी की बात कर रहे हैं? आप अपने जो आपके लोग हैं अक्रॉस द बॉर्डर पाकिस्तान में, आप उनकी बात करते हैं. आपने अपने ही बंदों को कश्मीर में मरवाया है. जो सज्जाद लोन के फादर हैं, अब्दुल गनी लोन, वो तो आपके अपने थे. और आप किस आज़ादी की बात करते हैं? So within minutes, I could see that the hall was completely silent. They were actually listening to me. And in the middle, Manoj Joshi tried to stop me and say that, okay, we know what you're saying and we respect that. I said, no, let me complete. And I then go on to say that, when have you campaigned against Yasin Malik, who has killed Kashmiri Pandits? When have you done protests at Lal Chowk against this injustice? And I don't speak as a Kashmiri Pandit alone. What have you done from the people of Jammu? What have you done for Gujjars and Bakarwals? For all these people who are equal Kashmiris? But you only speak of your masters across the border in Pakistan. And I could see not just a massive applause, which was okay. There was massive, shouting when Gilani tried to respond to me. And people did not let him speak at all. So this was what happened. This was perhaps the first time that on such a public forum, a separatist of the stature of Syed Ali Shah Gilani was countered. And that perhaps was a cusp, that changed the narrative really. And I got a lot of threats after that from Kashmiri terror groups, from separatists. I took them very lightly at that particular time because I was in Delhi and I could sense that
were
they
you
could
harmed in real life?
I wasn't really harmed, but often, if I know an incident back in 2013 or 14, I was walking at Lal Chowk with 4 or 5 of my colleagues and somebody just ran from behind. And in my ears, he said in Kashmiri, "Sechu marun, sechu kyo ramat, ismarot." And I had a Kashmiri colleague who is a journalist and an anchor now in India Today. And she got really scared. She said, "Were they actually threatening you?" I said, "Yeah, don't worry." He said, No, I'm not going to travel with you anymore. So since then, I get security whenever I travel to Kashmir. I have at least a few guards around me. I try to maintain a low profile. But such is life. Yeah, you counter separatists and terrorists and they are after your life. But I think this particular incident of countering Gilani was great because this motivated a lot of people, perhaps not just Kashmiris, but across the world, because this particular clip went viral. This was televised live on India Today and Aaj Tak. And thereafter, even 10 years, 12 years down the line, I get that video from someone and say, "Wow, is this you? You did a great job and we completely relate with you." So I'm glad that it spread a lot of awareness across India, because in these last 10 to 15 years that I've traveled in my journalism career, I see a lot of people across India who do not know what's happening in Kashmir, who do not know the recent history of Kashmir.
Even journalists also?
Many journalists. They had no idea that Kashmiri Pandits had suffered so much. They perhaps because of the growing narrative that Jagmohan had done it or separatists, had countered it in different ways. So the reality had not come out until, perhaps a lot of debates happened, a lot of protests happened. Thereafter, one of my old friends, Rahul Pandita, he wrote a book called Our Moon Has Blood Clots. There were other authors like Siddharth Kiggu, who wrote a book called The Garden of Solitude. And there are other books that came out. So slowly this awareness spread until, of course, this another film, Kashmir Files, came in. And it spread a lot of information about the reality, although it led to a lot of controversy as well, rightly or wrongly.
What's your opinion on people saying it's a propaganda-based movie when you hear that? Both as a journalist and as a Kashmiri Pandit.
I tell them to shut up. I mean, Kashmir Files is a reality as much as it can show. I personally feel that the Kashmir Files is just 5% or 10% of the reality. It's just that in the last 30 years, for the first time, there is a director, somebody from the film industry who came out and did not whitewash things, did not balance out things, actually showed the reality as it is. Unfortunately, the reality is brutal. The reality is that Kashmiri Hindus were ethnically cleansed. There was a genocide that happened. You may continue to deny it, you may wear blinkers on your eyes, but the reality is that Kashmiri Pandits were selectively targeted because they were Hindus, because they believed in the Indian flag, because they believed in Indian democracy and secularism. And these propagandists, Islamists, terrorists, even leftists to a great extent, did not want this to happen. They did not want Kashmiri Hindus to be equal stakeholders. And that's why we see a lot of this dialogue that happened, unfortunately, at the time of the Congress government or at the time of the Third Front government, or even when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was at power, was with separatists. I mean, why would you have a dialogue with separatists? Why would you invite a terrorist, a self-confessed terrorist like Yasin Malik, who went on to BBC and said that, yes, I killed Kashmiri Pandits. Yes, I abducted Rubia Sayed. Yes, I killed the Air Force men. Yasin Malik has confessed that. And still you invite him at the Prime Minister's residence. You hug him. You shake hands. Where in the world would you see a terrorist who has confessed on global television that, I have killed people. I have not just killed your minority people, but your Air Force men, your soldiers. And you are invited and garlanded inside the Prime Minister's residence. You are treated to biryani. And thereafter, in the last 30 to 35 years, he's not convicted. Even today, it astonishes me that Yasin Malik is inside prison. He has got life sentence. But that is a case of Hawala, which the NIA has been investigating. And that was registered somewhere around 2016 or 17. But in the case of the kidnapping of Rubia Saeed, in the case of the killing of the 4 Indian Air Force men, Yasin Malik has not been convicted. That case is on for last 30 years in Jammu's Tada court.
But why was Congress back then so soft with him?
Because Congress didn't know what to do. They did not have a political will. Their agenda was just to come in power, just to balance out things. And it's not just the Congress. There were members in the Indian intelligence agencies who were responsible for the kind of violence that is happening in the Kashmir Valley. Because they used to retain these separatists on money.
Money
in the sense that all these separatists, at least most of them, including Yasin Malik, used to get money from the Indian intelligence agencies. Yes.
That's
not many people know about this. Yasin Malik was a double agent. He used to receive money from the Pakistani intelligence agencies and he used to receive money from the Indian intelligence agencies.
But why did the Indian intelligence pay him?
Because they thought that, you could pay them and make him work your way.
As in your agent who goes to Pakistan.
Who goes to Pakistan or perhaps does things their way in Kashmir. That's what they thought. But he wasn't doing entirely. They always thought that the monthly money that is going to Yasin Malik, they were taking care of his health, they were giving him visa, free flights, everything, luxury. He used to stay in a Delhi hotel, everything possible. But he was doing whatever he wanted to do. He was taking Indian agencies for a ride completely. And perhaps it's time that the government of India should order an audit as to, in the last 30 years, who are these moles in the Indian intelligence agencies? Perhaps one chief as well of a particular intelligence agency who recruited Yasin Malik, who gave money to Yasin Malik. And instead of that agency, helping out Kashmir cause or the Indian government, Yasin Malik taking the Indian government and agencies for a ride completely. And there was a time when the Pakistani agencies came to know that he was acting on the behest of the Indian agencies. And there was a plot to kill Yasin Malik from the Pakistani side. That's what I hear from some of my friends. And thereafter what happened, this is somewhere around 2005, 2006. Yasin Malik went to Pakistan and there's this very viral photograph where Yasin Malik is sitting with Hafiz Saeed outside, I think, the Islamabad Press Club or the Lahore Press Club. And Hafiz Saeed is doing some Kashmir related protest there or whatever. and Yasin Malik is sitting with him. It is seen as this joint protest or Pakistanis and Kashmiris coming together. But the reality is, Yasin Malik was begging before Hafiz Saeed that I am your man. Please do not kill me. Please tell the Pakistani ISI that I will work for you. I am not in touch with the Indian agencies. And thereafter he was spared. He was not killed. And since 2006, 2007, you will see the trajectory of Kashmir. Stone pelting increased. Law and order situation increased. There was a few years later the Amarnath agitation that led to huge communal divide between Jammu and Kashmir. We had in 2010 more than 100 youth killed in Kashmir in stone pelting and violence. For months together, there was complete shutdown. Schools were not open, universities were not open, Lal Chowk and major markets were shut at the behest of Yasin Malik, Mirwais and Syed Ali Shah Gilani. There was this JRL, Joint Resistance Leadership, that they formed, even though all three people, Gilani, Mirwais and Yasin Malik, were poles apart. So, he was working, Yasin Malik was working at the behest of the ISI. And it was only perhaps after the Modi government came to power, and that too much later, in 2017, that they realized that something needed to be done. And they gave an open hand to the NIA. So the NIA suddenly, in the middle of 2017, decided to do these major raids. So on a particular day, I came to know a day before this, that the NIA was planning this. So I was working in the Republic TV at that time. So we placed our reporters all across in the Kashmir Valley, outside the airport. And in a special flight early in the morning, there were at least 50 to 100 of the NIA, investigators and officers who came in at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. in the morning. And our 4-5 reporters were outside. We were not expecting so many. And suddenly 40 places were raided in Kashmir Valley. NIA did that in 2017. And thereafter, it's history. In 2017, the NIA raids happened. The Hawala racket was completely broken in the Kashmir Valley. Stone pelters were picked up. Their middlemen, all these people were picked up, Zahur Watali, etc. All these separatists were picked up. And in 2019, we had a major crackdown where JKLF of Yasin Malik was banned again. Yasin Malik was arrested. Jamaat-e-Islami of South Kashmir, which was the backbone of the violence in the Kashmir Valley, was banned again. Their people were picked up. There were at least 4,000 to 5,000 stone pelters and people who were ringleaders of this violence were arrested. And suddenly we had calm. Today we see, after years of this abrogation of Article 370, we don't see any kind of violence. Do you see any stone pelting?
No.
And what was the situation 5 years back? Every single day used to be stone pelting. Day. In Navata, where the Jamia Masjid is, every Friday after prayers, you used to have major violence. Nobody was spared. This is the same Jamia where a Kashmiri Muslim police officer, Muhammad Ayub Pandit, was killed.
By terrorists.
By radicals. By radicals of IS. He was lynched, I think around 2017 or 2018. He was just doing his job as a CID officer of the JNK police. And, some of the radicals picked him, beat him up. And his body was lying outside the Jamia Masjid. And his bones were visible. He was killed so badly that his bones were visible. And there were at least 15 to 20 people later who were arrested and charged. But this is the reality of the Kashmir Valley. They won't spare even their own people. This is the kind of radicalism that has been ingrained at that particular time. But I'm glad that Article 370 is gone and it had to go. There was a political will that was needed, and I think I compliment Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Amit Shah and of course the NSA Ajit Doal for making this happen.
When we talk about the Kashmir problem specifically and we go to the very inception of it, there was this very prolific author I had on this podcast, Mr. Utpal Kumar, where he explicitly wrote about what things the Congress government / the Nehru government did wrong with Kashmir. So Britishers said this when they were leaving India, that we will leave India but we will keep a part of it. So according to him, Utpal Kumar, the part of it was actually Kashmir, where Britishers and Congress were basically responsible for this whole partition thing and the whole Kashmir issue. How do you see this thing?
Well, I'm not surprised. The divide and rule policy, dividing the countries almost on religious lines. This was a clear standard operating procedure of Britishers. And in Kashmir as well, a similar ploy was adopted. And, I don't want to make this political, but there were historical blunders. What was the need to take the Kashmir issue to the United Nations? Why did Nehru not take the permanent membership of the United Nations when it was offered? I mean, it was a historical strategic blunder by the Congress and Nehru in particular. Although, Nehru was a Kashmiri, and I'm told that originally he was a Kaul and later, adopted a surname Nehru. But I have no qualms in admitting this, that, it was unfortunately a historic blunder. And that one mistake led to decades of this kind of a separatism, decades of this religious dogma, of this kind of radicalization to be sneaking inside the society. And we are unfortunately the victims of this entire unfortunate incident that happened for decades together. And it will take more decades to actually restore order in Kashmir Valley, to have normalcy just like we have normalcy in Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, anywhere. So I think to a great extent it was a British ploy. Even today, when you see, foreign powers, particularly the Five Eyes intelligence, that is US, UK, Canada, Australia, I think New Zealand as well. So they try to strong arm India. They try to actually put pressure strategically in different ways. Today we see, and perhaps we'll talk about this in detail later, the Khalistani issue, which is ongoing in Canada, where a particular Khalistani terrorist who was a plumber, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, has been killed in June last year. And now Canadians are blaming India for it without any evidence. And the US is saying that there was a similar ploy to kill another Khalistani terrorist called Gurbhatwant Singh Pannu of SFJ. Again, no evidence at all. So these incidents are used by publishing stories in the international media, New York Post, BBC, etc., to put pressure on India. That, you work as per our wishes. You do trade as per our wishes. You do strategic bilateral ties as per our wishes.
You don't make your stand.
Exactly. At a time when India is rising, India is shining, everybody is taking note of India. Here are a few Western countries who are very uncomfortable by this, who do not want India's rise, who do not want India to shine at G20, UN, European Union, or any other multilateral forum. So they are uncomfortable. They can actually see that years from now, Modi and India's economy will significantly rise and challenge both US as well as China. And that's why they are putting these tactics to pressurize us. But I don't see any kind of change. And we have seen various examples of that. The recent Russia-Ukraine war, where India took a very independent stand. And there was a lot of pressure, a lot of lecturing that was coming in from European Union, where European Union said that, you have to act for peace, you have to act against Russia, Russians are killing, there's a genocide happening in Ukraine. Why should we speak? I mean, we are condemning violence, yes. Indians have always condemned violence. We have never stood by any kind of violence or terrorism. But you can't expect us to join one axis against the other. You can't expect us to join one group against the other. Why should we? We've historically stayed non-aligned. That has helped us immensely. And today, when America talks about America first, they have their own foreign policy and strategic powers in mind whenever they take any kind of a decision. Why shouldn't India? India, I think in the last 10 years, particularly in the last 3 to 4 years, has stood out, has taken independent stance on several issues. And that's how it is going to be. India first. Our policy is that whatever matters for the people of India, for our country, will be our priority always. That's what External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has been reiterating always. I interviewed him during the Russia-Ukraine war. I think our first priority at that time was to rescue the Indians. And that's what they made it happen. 24,000 Indian doctors and Indian people who were staying in Ukraine during the Russia-Ukraine war were rescued within weeks. And this was a time that many Americans and Chinese and Pakistanis, etc., were stuck there as well. But no United States, no China came to rescue them. Even Pakistanis and Nepalese and other nationals were rescued by India. Indian diplomats in the midst of the conflict went inside Ukraine, in Kharkov and other places, and rescued Indians. And you know how this happened?
How?
I actually was following this, and people, Congress party and others mock this. That's okay, they can mock it because they don't know the reality. But Prime Minister Modi and the PMO and the MEA were in touch with both Russia and Ukraine. And this is how non-aligned policy helps. You know, you have good relations both with Ukraine and with Russia. You have good rapport both with Zelensky and with Putin. They requested both of them that our people are stranded there. Already one Indian national has been killed. We want our people out. There was a particular location where at least a few hundred of our students, perhaps 1,000 or so, were stuck inside the basement. And neighboring areas were being bombed all across. There was no place evacuation route for them to go to the railway station or a bus, etc. Prime Minister Modi requested Putin and Zelensky that, we want our people out. I don't know how you do it. Putin said that, yes, I will allow you a pause. I will do a pause for a few hours and you will have to make it happen within that time. And Zelensky was already on board. And that was the pause that MEA used. Indian diplomats, not Indian commandos. Indian diplomats actually went with buses inside that region, took out people and actually rescued them.
I'm so glad you brought this thing about Indian foreign policy. I specifically wanted to ask question about this because I personally feel it as much as I have studied what has happened in the last 10 years, that now India has become unapologetic. And that is what our External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, is also argumenting, that we are now unapologetic and we are going to take our individual stand. Like, I really see this, that one side you are having a government who really gave a permanent seat to China just out of good faith or good spirits. On other side, you are having a government who is making calls to Russia and Ukraine amidst the war to stop the war for certain time so that they can take out their citizens. How do you as a journalist see this? That how did India become so individualistic, unapologetic about their stance when it comes to foreign policy?
Aftab, if there's one country in the world that deserves to be a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, it is India. Yes, many people will say Japan, they will say Mexico, they will say Brazil, they will say other countries. But I think one country that really deserves and has put in all the effort, stakes at the United Nations, helped in multiple ways. We have put in humanitarian aid at the United Nations. We have done the International Yoga Day at the United Nations. The troops of the UN security, that is in Congo, in African countries as peacekeepers, we have the largest contingent of the forces from India there. We have done a lot for the International Solar Alliance. We have contributed in every way possible. And we are also pushing the United Nations for the last 25 to 30 years to define terrorism, to actually have a charter against terrorism, a common definition of terrorism, and to do something about it. And that's how the UN has failed completely. India has shown the mirror to the United Nations because several examples have come to light where they couldn't stop the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Only mere statements. And UN has become a paper tiger, unfortunately. The recent example of the Israel-Hamas war, where you condemn violence by Hamas, but then you become mouthpieces of Hamas. The debate against the UN Organization for the Refugees of Gaza, where a lot of these Hamas people have entered, and they are trying to take the humanitarian aid from the common people, Palestinians of Gaza, and the United Nations hasn't been able to do anything, and that's why Israel is frustrated. That you need to act against terrorism. You need to support. You need to stop the Hamas, kind of violence that is coming in. Look at the leaders of the Hamas who are staying in Qatar in luxurious life. They have a pool, they have a villa, they have private jets, and they have all kinds of luxury. And they are letting their sons, daughters, not their sons and daughters are enjoying, but their community people are dying out there. It's similar to Kashmir, back home, where we had Syed Ali Shah Gilani, we have Yasin Malik Mirwais. All these separatists.
Manipulating people.
Yeah, they are manipulating people. They are using children of other people to indulge in violence and get killed. Their own children are in London, in Singapore, in US, in Dubai, enjoying their life. They have all the money, they have all the luxury. This is the conflict industry, where the main players are smart. They won't let anyone touch them. They won't let their own families suffer, but they'll push others into this conflict. So I think, moving away from this, I think India's foreign policy has had a paradigm shift over the years. A lot of it has been because a lot of foreign agents, or should I say foreign countries, have pushed India into this. For example, I'll tell you, 26/11 happened. One of the biggest terror attacks on Indian soil. Questions on India's sovereignty. How does India react? There was a plan in place. Jaishankar Menon, the former NSA, has written this in his book, that there was a plan to attack Muridke, the headquarters of the Lashkar-e-Toiba in Pakistan. Did the Congress government act? They did not. They told the NSA, they told the Indian Army, they told the intelligence agencies, no, we don't want war. We don't want to react. Because the 26/11 was let happen, because Kasab survived all these years, because there was no urgent action taken by the Congress government at that time, we had Pulwama, we had Pathankot, we had Uri, we had Dinanagar, we had multiple of these terror attacks in Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab, we had Nagrota. And we have now Poonch. We have several of these attacks happening, where if you do not set a precedent, if you do not give a strong reaction, they will take you for a ride. We have seen several of these incidences where a soft approach was applied towards Pakistan, and they did not do anything. So what Prime Minister Narendra Modi did immediately after he came to power, he invited all the neighboring leaders. He invited all the South Asian leaders to his inauguration. When the swearing-in ceremony happened, we had Nawaz Sharif. I met Nawaz Sharif at that time at Taj Hotel. Nawaz Sharif was there. All the political leaders were there. And he led an olive branch towards Pakistan. He told Sushma Swaraj that you go to Pakistan, you see if talks can happen and we can have some kind of a resolution. Sushma Swaraj went to Pakistan. There were, talks that were going to happen. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, while he was in Afghanistan for inauguration of a few projects, on his return, he made a surprise stop in Pakistan. He visited Nawaz Sharif's house and actually participated in a family wedding. And that was a huge surprise for the global community. And yet what we saw is terror attacks. When there was a clinching peace agreement between India and Pakistan to be signed, we had the Pathankot terror attack. And thereafter we know what's been happening. Every time there has been a dialogue about peace, about cooperation, we have been backstabbed. The biggest of all was the Pulwama terror attack, where more than 40 of our bravehearts of the CRPF lost their lives. And I am told that in the evening of the Pulwama terror attack, the government of India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, decided that enough was enough. One, of course, on a place and time of our choosing, we are going to react. We are going to respond to Pakistan. We are going to teach them a lesson. Second, we are going to ignore Pakistan. We are not going to give the same kind of attention to Pakistan that we have done over the decades. And third, we are going to change things in Kashmir the way we want. These were the three decisions taken by Prime Minister Narendra Modi along with Ajit, Doal and Amit Shah. And thereafter, nobody knew what they are going to do. And suddenly we had the Balakot airstrike, where the headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed was completely busted. Who knows how many died? Nobody knows. Some say 30, some say 300. But that was the headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed. Maulana Masood Azhar, when he was released in the Kandahar hijacking around 1998-99, he established Balakot as the first center of Jaish-e-Mohammed. That is where all these terrorists were trained to attack Kashmir and perhaps other regions across the globe. So I think India taught a lesson. India escalated the situation with Pakistan, and then Pakistan now thinks twice before acting.
Even post, I think these strikes, from 2020 onwards, there have been this killing going on in Pakistan to these terrorists, where news articles say that unknown gunman killed terrorist and all this happened. And I think I was reading this in The Guardian that they said that Pakistan official gave them a statement that Indian RAW is training their own agents in UAE, and then they are also training some local agents there in Pakistan. They are paying them, and then they are telling them to kill these people, these terrorists in Pakistan. how do you see this whole thing?
The biggest question for multiple agencies across the globe, including the ISI, CIA, MI6, others, is that who are these unidentified gunmen running across Pakistan? But, the question really is that you need to understand history. I do not know who these unidentified gunmen is, but I can tell you that back, I think, a couple of years back in 2022, I think around March, I got information that a man called Zahoor Mistry was killed in Pakistan. This was in Lahore, or perhaps this was in Karachi. Zahoor Mistry was a carpenter and he was killed. I tried to check Pakistani media, there wasn't much news, so I checked with a few friends who went there, and the local crime reporters in Karachi told him that yes, there was a carpenter Zahoor Mistry who was killed, and there was a photograph of his dead body. And it was later that I realized, after talking to a lot of senior journalists in Pakistan, that they have been told not to report this killing. So I checked and I realized that Zahoor Mistry was one of the hijackers of the IC-814 that was hijacked from Kathmandu in Nepal and taken to Kandahar. This was the same Indian Airlines flight that was hijacked and in which Maulana Masood Azhar was released. Zahoor Mistry was one of the youngest hijackers among the 6 people who hijacked that aircraft. And nobody knew who had killed Zahoor Mistry. Somebody had just walked in. There were 2 bikers who came in and point blank from a pistol killed him. And that is how at least 20 to 25 of the killings have happened in Pakistan and perhaps in Canada, in UK, and a few other places.
So we basically don't know who these men are.
You don't know, but I'll give you another context to this. In Kashmir, all these years, in the last 30 years, you will see the local media, whenever they report on the killings that are happening, firstly they call terrorist militants. And then they say that unidentified persons killed a security person.
Very quickly, difference between a terrorist and a militant for the viewers.
Terrorist is a terrorist who spreads terror in the name of religion, in the name of any community, in the name of anything. A terrorist is a person who uses violence to, achieve his goals. Militant, in comparison, is almost an apologetic term in which, militant is shown as someone who is a rebel, who is somebody who is doing this for a just cause, who is actually rebelling against some kind of an occupation, for instance. So he's a militant because circumstances have made him to rebel and use arms for his own protection. So I think militant is a very wrong term which is used in the context of Kashmir. These are terrorists. I would go to the extent of saying that these are Islamist terrorists because we don't see any kind of Hindu terror. We Kashmiri Hindus suffered immensely. We lost our people, we lost our homes, we lost our temples, we lost our history, we lost everything. We perhaps lost our homeland Kashmir forever. But we never picked up arms, we never picked up guns, we never saw violence to achieve our goals. We saw perhaps education as the only goal. We, even while staying in camps, picked up the pen and never looked back. I know people who have lived in camps and are now global CEOs, sitting in Dubai, in US, in UK, elsewhere. They are journalists, they are top editors, they are policemen, they are IFS officers, they are global honchos, in every profession possible. So I don't think that there is any justification that can be done for terrorism, for violence, for killing innocent people, either civilians or security forces. And I think terrorism needs to be dealt very, very strongly. So I do not know who these unidentified gunmen are. Are these the same unidentified gunmen that the Kashmir media reported all these years, that unidentified gunmen have killed Indian security forces, unidentified gunmen have killed Kashmiri Pandits, unidentified gunmen have killed Kashmiri Sikhs? Perhaps Pakistan needs to contemplate and think and introspect who these unidentified gunmen are, because if you live by the gun, you die by the gun. That is the reality. And in Kashmiri, we have a saying, and I'll tell you that if I remember it correctly. Anyam soy, vavum soy, lejam soy pansi. And that means that you reap what you sow. So if you have pushed terrorism, if you have pushed violence, if you have pushed Islamist radicalization for the last 30 to 40 years in a community, in a people, in a land which is alien to you, you are bound to suffer by the same in the years to come. Look at the situation in Pakistan today. One, there is a political chaos.
Economical downfall.
Economical downfall. They are begging in front of the World Bank, IMF, UN, elsewhere to support us. They're begging before the Islamic countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, everyone, Turkey, help us, give us money, make us survive all these years. We are Muslims. And nobody is coming to their rescue. They are assuring them that, you have done this in the past. You've taken money from us and we don't know where that money has gone. China is doing the same. China talked about the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and the BRI, and today there are Chinese who are getting killed in Pakistan for supporting Pakistani economy, infrastructure, etc. So I would say that Pakistan is digging its own grave. Pakistan is suffering immensely because of its own policy. Their sole foreign policy agenda is to attack India, to counter India, to abuse India. Their domestic policy, their politics is revolving around India completely. So until that changes, nothing is going to happen. And secondly, Pakistan, as you know, is ruled by the Pakistan Army. Pakistan is ruled by generals in Rawalpindi. 9th May 2023 was the most embarrassing moment for Pakistan since the surrender of 93,000 troops in front of the Indian Army, where the Pakistani civilians rebelled against the Pakistan Army. They entered the ISI headquarters, the Pakistan Army headquarters, in several cases, many other infrastructure of the Pakistan Army. And there was massive rioting that happened. And even today, in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, you see protests against the Pakistan Army, where the Pakistani police personnel, security personnel are almost being lynched in a particular funny incident, and you will see this on Google or some news channel, that trousers of a Pakistan Army personnel have been taken out and hung on the main chowk in Dandial in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So the kind of stone pelting, law and order situation, protests that we witnessed over years in Kashmir are now visible in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The only difference is that the world media is not reporting that. This is the reality. So I do not know who the unidentified gunmen are. Some people will blame the RNAW, the Indian government, the Indian commandos or special forces. I don't think so. I think it could be anybody. Why not the ISI themselves? They want to show to the world that they are countering terrorism. So maybe they are killing their own people.
Countering terrorism by actually supporting India.
Yeah, you never know. Not exactly supporting India. But if you mostly see the people who are being killed, these are has-beens. These are terrorists who were terrorists at a particular time. And their role or their use in Pakistan's proxy war is over, far over. So these people who were active in 90s or late 90s are now being eliminated. They are not active now. So if you study case by case, the people who are being killed are terrorists who were terrorists at a particular point in time, 20 years back, 25 years back. So you never know. ISI or the Pakistan Army is killing their own people who they supported all these years. And you may blame India. Thank you very much for that. You see Indian agencies capable to do that on Pakistani soil. But the reality is that Pakistan is digging its own grave. Pakistan has yielded no results in this kind of a proxy war in Kashmir. After Article 370 abrogation, Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. It always was. And after 370, there's a stamp. There's a political stamp. There's a stamp by the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And there's now a stamp by the Supreme Court of India. So nothing is going to change that history. Pakistan, unfortunately, is going to implode itself. It's going to explode. And now you see, even funnily, the Afghan Taliban, which was working closely with Pakistan, the Haqqani network that was working closely with Pakistan, is hammer and tongs against them. I mean, it's funny that Pakistan Army and the ISI thought that Taliban will work as their team B in Kabul once they come to power. But Taliban have their own independent policy. I would say today, in 2024, Taliban is much more close to India than Pakistan.
Taliban is much more close to India.
Strategically, Taliban is much more close to India because Taliban has the vision to see that they can do trade with India. They can actually get humanitarian aid from India. They actually see in South Asia, if there is a power that is going to, create history or rise dynamically over the years, it's India, not Pakistan. So they see Taliban's future with India instead of Pakistan. And in Pakistan, there is a Pakistani Taliban.
But should India see the future with Taliban?
We have to see this very strategically. I do not want India to support the Taliban or perhaps, wear blinkers towards the kind of violence that they're doing or not allowing girls' education or human rights excesses and violence. That's not tolerable. India needs to protest that. India needs to raise its voice against that. But in the region, we have to live by the reality. The reality is that Taliban controls the Afghan land. And we need to have not diplomatic, but perhaps some kind of a engagement, some kind of a dialogue that needs to continue. There are two scenarios where Taliban actually takes control of Pakistan perhaps years from now and then attacks Kashmir. It can happen, very much it can happen. I mean, Pakistan Taliban is very active. We've seen Taliban elements actually entering Pakistan occupied Kashmir as well. In some regions, Gilgit-Baltistan as well. There has been firefight that has happened. So Pakistan, I don't think, is able to control the Taliban as much as it wants to. We see almost on a daily basis TTP attacking several of the Pakistani army personnel, the frontier corps and civilians. And now the TTP has gone to the extent of warning the Pakistani politicians that you are next. So India, to maintain its strategic interests in the region, will have to have a good dialogue with Afghanistan. And I think that has continued. We were close to the democratic government when it was in power in the past, and we are now close to the Taliban. That does not again mean that we support their violence or human rights violations. That just means that we have a communication line open with the Taliban. We send in humanitarian aid for the people of Afghanistan, not for the Taliban, and that has to remain open.
Also, when we talk about Indian foreign policy, or we specifically talk about how now big foreign leaders, whether they are the Prime Minister or the President of the country, are seeing India, or whenever they are asked any question about India, they explicitly praise PM Modi, how the things have developed in India. And there was this PM of Australia who said that India is a democratic superpower. So when we talk about this, the top three names that come is Ajit, Doal, Jaishankar and PM Modi. So you being in this foreign affair and political affair to some extent, how do you see the trio of these two and how it helps India in all the ways?
I think that's an excellent question. Modi, Jaishankar and Doal have worked for India, the strategic foreign policy of India, like nobody else. I think even the opposition would admit that to a great extent, even if they do it privately. Jaishankar is a career diplomat. I've seen him work in United States. I've seen him work in China very, very closely. I've had interaction with him on several levels. I have seen Ajit Doal. I've seen him work as the NSA in his office. I've held several interactions with him. There are some interactions that I cannot talk about right now because he is still holding that office, and I respect that. But perhaps sometime in future I will be able to. But I completely respect the trio. I do not go by politics. I do not go by ideology here. I just see India first. And when we talk about India first, we talk about India's rise. These are the three names that come to power. I think the security architecture, the security overhaul or the paradigm shift that has been brought in by NSA Ajit Doal is drastic. There would have been no Article 370 abrogation if there was no Ajit Doal, if there was no Saman Koel as the RNAW chief, if there was no Amit Shah sitting as the Home Minister, and of course no Modi as the Prime Minister. So I think they have made that happen, and security architecture changing dynamically in the area, India's internal security improving drastically. You look at the situation in the 90s and even after that, there were bomb blasts all across. In Delhi, we are sitting here. I remember Lajpat Nagar bomb blast. I remember Sarojini Nagar bomb blast. I remember Greater Kailash bomb blast. I remember Connaught Place bomb blast. Bomb blasts after bomb blasts happening. I remember bomb blasts in Varanasi, in Agra, in several other places, in Jaipur, perhaps in some places down south as well, apart from, of course, Jammu and Kashmir again having terror attacks every alternate day. Does it happen today? No.
But what has changed so drastically?
Changed is the kind of leadership that Ajit Doal has given to the Indian security forces.
As in more access to power?
Not just access to power, free hand to the security forces and discipline given to the security forces, more technology, more arms available, intelligence of the security forces, counterintelligence improving drastically, not just in Kashmir but all across India. We have a very important agency in Delhi called the Special Cell that works with the Delhi police. That is one of the finest anti-terrorist force in the country. Special Cell itself. Of course, we have the NIA. Of course, in Kashmir, we have the SIA. Of course, we have Indian Army, we have the CRPF and other wings of the government working. But I think Intelligence Bureau, Research and Analysis Wing, RNAW, getting a lot of finest equipment, collaboration with several countries, including the US, UK, in many cases France, etc., has helped immensely. We have a great defense and strategic ties with Israel. Well, Israel has helped us with a lot of equipment, including missiles, including drones, etc. So I think that has changed. We were not, as close to Israel as we have been in the last 10 years. I remember in 2015, if I'm not wrong, was the first head of the state visit to Israel that happened from India. Can you imagine? Pranab Mukherjee was the first president of India who visited Israel, and I was part of his delegation. I went to Israel and Palestine with President Pranab Mukherjee. And I saw that people in Palestine and Israel both love India, from a car mechanic to the president, because I interviewed President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah in Palestine. And the kind of love that both Jews and Muslims have for India is immense. So that's why India has had an independent policy even in the Israel-Palestine conflict. India stands for a two-state solution.
In Palestine?
Yes, India recognizes Palestine. But at the same time, we have a very close strategic and defense partnership with Israel. We support the right of Jews and Israel to live side by side with Palestinians. We condemn all kind of Islamist terrorism of Hamas that is coming in. India was one of the first countries to condemn it after the 7th October massacre of the Jews that happened in southern Israel. And do you know, this happened in 2023. In 2022, I was there in Israel. I was invited by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel, and along with the IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Forces, I was made to visit all the borders. I actually visited the border with, Gaza in that area. I visited the border with, Syria at the northern part, at the Golan Heights. So I saw all these places. The Kerem Shalom border checkpoint, which was attacked recently, in which 4 soldiers of the IDF were killed. And in the initial attack also, Kerem Shalom was one of the first that was attacked. I was there. I was part of that entire process. And I saw the kind of trouble that the Israeli people are facing at the hands of the Hamas terrorists. So India condemns that. But India also stands with humanity. India stands for the Palestinians to exist, their state to exist, their people to live there. And that's why India sends in a lot of humanitarian aid through Egypt to the people of Palestine, not the Hamas. And Israel respects that. Israel has not condemned that. I have been speaking to Naor Gilon, who is the ambassador of Israel here, and I've been speaking to Israeli politicians and people in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. They completely respect and they see India as one of their closest ally.
Perhaps US doesn't like the closeness India has with Israel. How do you see that?
That's okay. US has its own interests in mind, and I think over the years, the kind of clout and power that Americans had all across the globe, it has significantly changed. We are living in a new international order where, there are different groupings that are coming in. We have Russia, Iran, China, on one hand, perhaps to an extent, North Korea as well. And on the other hand, we have this Western world. And in the middle stands India, which says that, we will not ally with anybody. We have close partnership with US. We respect that. We've had traditional historical ties with Russia. We'll have that. we gave a lot of opportunities to China. We had the Chennai Connect, we had the Wuhan Spirit, we had a lot of dialogues with Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi, but again China backstabbed us. We had unfortunately Galwan, in which again 20 of our soldiers were killed, and there were more than double or triple of the Chinese PLA that were killed. And mind you, China has not revealed how many of their soldiers were killed. They officially just admit about 5 or 6. But I can tell you more than 50, 60 Chinese PLA soldiers were killed in the Galwan clash. Perhaps somebody in history will come out and reveal this reality and their names. But they are so scared of the propaganda, of the narrative war, of the reality to come out, that they just don't imagine. They don't respect their soldiers. They do not want world to recognize the killings or the martyrdom of their own soldiers.
But why are we not able to be on a consensus with China, as in both sides?
I think there are 2 reasons. One, of course, is the border dispute. But second and major is that Chinese have an expansionist policy. Chinese do not believe in rules-based order. They do not believe in democracy. They have an expansionist tendency. That means China wants to have their hegemony in South Asia and the neighboring region. China wants to be the only elephant in the room. China wants to be the only power.
I think dragon in the room would be
Dragon in the room, yeah, of course. As compared to elephant, India. So I think China's border dare has been met with India's troop build-up in Eastern Ladakh. I was recently in Siachen and Eastern Ladakh, and I was traveling with the Indian Army there, and I saw massive troop build-up that I haven't seen. I've visited Ladakh almost a dozen times in the last 15 years. But the kind of troop build-up that we have, the kind of preparedness that we have, and the most important factor, the kind of infrastructure development that we have seen in Eastern Ladakh is unparalleled. The PRO and the Indian Army have built in world-class roads in Eastern Ladakh, and I was blown by the kind of developments that I saw. I was standing at the China border, not the border, but the line of actual control in Eastern Ladakh, and I could get 5G there. And that talks a lot, because the first time that I visited that area in 2013, professionally, first time, I took 9 hours to travel from Leh to Pangong Lake. There were no roads. There was Kacha Rasta completely. And today we take hardly 3-4 hours or maximum 4-5 hours to reach Pangong. And that's huge. That's a massive achievement. And this is what was not happening. China has this, Xi Jinping has this China dream that he revealed in 2012, 2013. And this China dream includes expansionist tendency, taking over areas of India, etc. in Eastern Ladakh, Arunachal and other places. So we need to recognize this fact. In 2013, the Indian Army was very much prepared to tackle the Chinese. In 2013, we have had incursions in Depsang, in Chumar, in different other areas of the line of actual control from the Chinese. And the Indian Army chief went to the Prime Minister and NSA of that time. I think it was Manmohan Singh and maybe Jaishankar Menon, I'm not sure. And he said that I have a plan to tackle the Chinese, to respond to the incursions. But the Prime Minister replied and said, no, you don't have to. We don't want a war. We don't want any kind of such response to the Chinese. The only way to deal with a bully is to stand up to the bully. If you do not stand up to the bully in this case China, you will actually become a small pawn in their entire game. And this is a long game of deception of the Chinese, where they will not fight a full-scale war, but they will do propaganda to such an extent. They will do incursions to such an extent that you will not know what has happened.
Incursions as in what?
Incursions means that entering our territory. Because, there are thousands of kilometers of barren land in Eastern Ladakh. And every few days or weeks or months, China tries to go a little further. There is a dialogue in place, militarily and diplomatic, between both the countries, in which we respect each other. We believe the Panchsheel agreements and the agreements that we have signed in the 90s as well, perhaps in 93 and 96, that say that we will not use arms in the region. We will not fire at each other. There will only be peaceful dialogue. There will only be a status quo in the sense that there will be joint patrolling in these areas. But after Galwan, that joint patrolling has ended. After Galwan, we have a situation wherever the Chinese are, they are maintaining their positions. wherever the Indians are, we are maintaining our positions. There's no headway in the dialogue between India and China, either militarily or diplomatically. So these incursions have happened in the past, but more so after 2012, 2013, etc. If we had acted in 2012, 2013, Galwan wouldn't have happened. And unfortunately, we looked the other way every time there was an incursion from the Chinese. And unfortunately, today, we become victims of Galwan.
But what is the contemporary solution to this problem?
Well, the solution is, as I said, you have to rise up to the bully. You have to maintain Quad. For instance, an alliance, a grouping of countries that keep China under check. You have the Indo-Pacific. You have joint military exercises that are happening. You have the Quad meetings that are happening in India, Japan, Australia, US. So this grouping has to work together. These are groupings of democratic countries that believe in democratic principles, that believes in rules-based order. And that is what will keep China under check, at least for the time being. I do not know a larger solution for future. But as of now, the Quad is a very important grouping that continues to question China. And at the same time, we need to absolutely have a strong gripping on our border areas, particularly in eastern Ladakh, particularly in Arunachal, Sikkim and all these places. Because I've always said that the kind of undue attention that we were giving to Pakistan over the last many decades wasn't necessary. Thousands and thousands of crores have gone into defense spending to counter or perhaps keep our borders towards the west with Pakistan at bay. I think undue attention was given to Pakistan. Now and always the real threat has been China. And we need to counter that threat by actually being prepared to counter any kind of eventuality that happens in the region. And I don't see China actually fighting a full-scale war, but India has to be prepared. We could see developments in Taiwan. We could see developments in South China Sea. We have the Chinese spy ship going to Sri Lanka and Maldives. And now with the Maldives elections where a Chinese puppet has come to power, we need to stay extra vigilant because Chinese military could take control in some of the regions in Maldives and have their own military infrastructure in place, their radars in place. So as of now, I think India has realized its lessons the tough way with China after Galwan, and we have changed our policy there. Chinese apps have been banned. TikTok of all was banned, and now there's a huge debate in US about banning TikTok. So a lot has happened over the years since Galwan. And since we have been talking about the unidentified gunmen, there's also the espionage and spying that happens a lot between these countries. So I'll give you an example before I stop this answer. And that is that, just after Galwan, I received a call on my WhatsApp from an India number saying that I'm so-and-so journalist. It was a Hindu name and I work for the Telegraph in UK. And I just wanted to know some details from you. And I asked him, what details? And this person said that I wanted some details about military and what's happening in Eastern Ladakh and how is India going to respond. So I was busy at that time. So I said, can you call me tomorrow? I'm a little busy. I can't speak. So the gentleman said, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. So tomorrow I received the call again. And somehow something told me that it was not clear. So I had checked with the Telegraph Bureau Chief in India that is this person by this name working in Telegraph? And he said, no, there's nobody from this name.
Damn.
And I realized something was fishy. So the next time this guy called, I recorded that conversation. So I asked him details and I did not reveal any details. He asked me that what is the Indian military doing, which arm of the military, Mountain Strike Corps, etc. is going to Ladakh, when will they go, how will India react, what is Modi thinking, what is Ministry of Defense thinking. So I had only one answer. I said, Modi functions in a very different manner. He doesn't reveal any secrets to the media. In India, they are very different. They don't say anything to the media. So I don't know anything. Let me see if they reveal anything. I'll let you know. And I recorded that conversation and I gave that conversation to two military agencies, military intelligence agencies. And I told them that something is fishy. This guy is asking me these questions and this is the conversation. If you could just check. And you won't believe. Both these agencies by evening got back to me and they said, thanks for sharing this with us because this is a Pakistani guy who's calling you from Lahore, from an India number on WhatsApp. This number was taken from New Delhi by a diplomat of the Pakistani High Commission a few years ago. While the number is not in use, but the number is used on WhatsApp and is being used by the Pakistani ISI from Lahore or Karachi, wherever, and they are working for the Chinese. Chinese intelligence agencies and the Pakistani intelligence agencies are working together. So that's why he's trying to check what's happening in Eastern Ladakh, etc. And he said similar calls have been made to several army officers to get details about what's happening, etc. So imagine, that is the work of espionage that happens.
It's such a small scale.
And later we came to know a lot of editors also later got called from the same person. They recognized the voice.
Damn, this is happening at such a small scale. But now when you are telling this, this appears to be so big.
Yes.
So I guess summarizing this conversation and moving towards the end, I was actually wondering what should I ask or how should we actually conclude this conversation. But here is what I would really like to know. You're someone who has been in journalism since a long period of time. Perhaps 2 decades would be right?
1.5 decades. More than 15 years.
But specifically sticking to last 10 years and the sort of things that has happened in last 10 years, whether via means of law, whether via means of your foreign policy, anything you say. How do you think that this has evolved India and created the new India image? And what have you taken from it?
I have observed India perhaps from a very young age because, when I was in school, I had this aim of becoming a journalist. And thereafter, circumstances after school led me to become an activist. And thereafter, I joined the media and actually became a journalist. From Kashmir to Delhi, everywhere. And over the years, I've seen India in different phases. I've seen an India that did not respond to our pleas and plights from Kashmir when terrorists were killing us. I've seen an India where the government looked the other way when minority was being killed in Kashmir, security forces were being killed in Kashmir, and nobody bothered. I've seen an India where when we questioned Yasin Malik, terrorists like Yasin Malik and Gilani, we were arrested. I have been arrested on multiple occasions. In one case, I was in prison for 24 hours. And I was arrested and thereafter given bail, and then that case continued for a year. I have seen an India where when we questioned Syed Ali Shah Gilani provoking violence in Delhi at the LTG auditorium along with Arundhati Roy and others, we had Chidambaram, the Home Minister of that time, saying that no, this is freedom of expression. I will not act against them. Imagine that. And I've seen an India where Yasin Malik today is in prison for the last 5 years. I've seen an India where now there is no violence or law and order situation in Kashmir. There is no stone pelting. Most of the separatists are inside prison. And we don't see a situation of a drastic law and order situation, even though a relative complete peace will take time. I've also seen an India where we do not have the political will or the capacity to counter Pakistan or counter Canada or counter United States. Today, I see in India that every time there's an Uri, there will be a surgical strike in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Every time there's a Pulwama where 40 bravehearts sacrifice their life for the country, there will be a Balakot airstrike. Every time Pakistan dares to enter India and see us into the eye and kill innocents, be it minorities or Muslims or anybody, Indian citizens, there will be a strong escalation and a strong response. Pakistan today will think twice before sending in terrorists and launching any major terror attack on Indian soil. I see an India today that is shaping the global reality, a new global reality where we talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but we also talk about, peace being given a chance. It was Indian Prime Minister who at the G20 in Bali said that war is not something that we should go for. This is not an era of war. We need to talk about peace. And I think we have been able to speak with different global countries who do not see eye to eye. And India, I think, in the coming years, will play a very pivotal role. I do not know the results of the elections that will happen now. Perhaps Prime Minister Modi will come back to power for the third term because he has the strongest support that is visible today, at least in the narrative on social media and on ground. But I see in India, which will play a very important and significant role. India's stature globally and strategically is rising because we see two economies, two countries rising, not just in the matter of population, but economy. One is China and one is India. China, of course, is a little far ahead, and it will take time for India to match up. But when the global community, including the Western countries, including the global South, when it looks towards India and China, and it is told to pick sides, it will pick India. It will not pick China. It will pick democracy. It will pick a country that believes in rules-based order. It will pick a country that during the pandemic stood up, did not give the world the virus, actually gave the world the solution, which is the vaccine Maitri, that helped more than 100 to 120 countries, to many countries free of cost. I think the world will believe that. I was there when, during the G20 at the Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi, we had Prime Minister Narendra Modi announce that a consensus had reached. And that was a historical moment. Many of the Western journalists couldn't believe it, that on Russia-Ukraine there was a consensus in New Delhi. One was that historical reality that India made it happen. The second most significant was the African Union becoming a part of the G20. And the representative of the African Union in tears, crying that I couldn't believe that I can be a part of the G20, and it was only India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Foreign Minister Jaishankar that made it happen. This is something only India can make it happen. India is the voice of the global South. I would say that India will play an incredible role because our tenets, our culture, our roots are something that talk about peace, that talk about calm, that talk about the world is a reality, but world has to work together in unity. And we do not see wars, violence, or one-upmanship against any other country. And today is an India that is rising up to Canada. When Canada accused India of all this violence and terrorism without any evidence, in the floor of the House, Justin Trudeau went to the House of Commons in Canada. India immediately responded by breaking diplomatic ties and saying that you can reduce your Canadian diplomats here, we do not want you. In response, Canada had to do the same. And it was Canada who did it and India responded. But Canada has no other solution now because there are maximum Punjabis who want to go to Canada, and Canada does not have a staff in place. So Canada is embroiled in their own game. And today, the situation that was there in Pakistan, and Hillary Clinton had said this in 2011, that snakes in your backyard, if you nurture them, if you continue to look the other way, they will bite you one day. And Canada is nurturing the snakes in their backyard. They are nurturing the Khalistani elements. And today, there are gangland violences that is happening in Canada, where gangs are acting against each other. We have killings openly happening, gangs openly working in different parts of Canada, and Justin Trudeau government is unable to control it. So the reality is that Justin Trudeau has not worked against Khalistanis. He has not given RCMP, the Canadian police, the power to act against the Khalistani criminals. And the reality is that the Khalistanis have got a safe shelter, a safe haven in Canada. Back during the Kanishka bombing in the 80s, it was father of Justin Trudeau who did not act. Indira Gandhi kept telling him that you need to act against the Khalistanis, and then we had the Kanishka bombing in which so many Canadians died. And even today they cannot answer. They did not convict the people who were responsible for it. And today, Justin Trudeau is walking on the footsteps of his father. He's just not doing anything. And India is again showing him the mirror. India is showing mirror to the Five Eyes intelligence that, you can't take us for a ride. You can't just accuse us in front of the global community. In fact, the articles that are coming in The Guardian and elsewhere where it is being shown that India has killed terrorists in Canada or Pakistan is helping the Modi government. Actually, if you see the domestic narrative, the BJP supporters of the right wing or people across India are happy that India never did this, and is India doing this? Is India killing Hardeep Singh Nijjar? Is India about to kill Gurpatwant Singh Pannu? Are people in US and Canada so scared that India is actually entering their soil and killing them? But India may or may not have done it. I don't think India has done it. But, you kill Osama bin Laden in Pakistan and that is not a problem. You do not think that you have violated the territory. You do drone strikes in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Yemen, elsewhere. You kill thousands and lakhs of Muslims all across the world. And you don't think that you have violated any international laws. But you think that Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a terrorist, if killed by a rival gang member in Canada, becomes a huge international problem. These are tactics that are used by foreign intelligence agencies to strong-arm India. But I think India is far above this. India is not going to surrender. India is not going to look the other way. India is shining, India is rising, and India will go by its priority, that is India first, and our strategic interests, our internal security, people of India, whatever benefits us, will be our top priority. And when it comes to terrorism, India will strike back. India will not look the other way.
That's a very powerful message, and I guess if a BJP government is coming again, it would be spreading with much more, I would say, I'm not having the correct word here, but quickness, or with quickness with positivity. So I guess that was all from my side. I hope so I was able to do justice to this conversation. I hope so I was able to, how do I put this, that provided your stature, provided your experience, provided the amount of things you have seen, I was able to set this conversation in the right tone. I guess that was all from my side. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you, Aftab. Thank you so much. Pleasure being here. And I wish you, your entire team, AP Podcast, a lot of success. I hope people all across the country listen to you. And
now perhaps after this podcast, the world will also see this.
Hope
Your
so.
cult following.
Hope so. All the very best.
Thank you so much, sir.